This is Abe Friedhanser from Awards Radar, and I'm thrilled to be speaking with Amel Amin about Rustin. How are you, Amel?
I'm good, Abe. Well, go on. Are you good?
Yeah, so you play Martin Luther King Jr. in a supporting role in a movie, which I think is probably a rare thing because most stories about him, he's the main character.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So, what did you know about this whole story and about his life involving Rustin?
I knew nothing of Rustin. I didn't know who Rustin was. I mean, I remember I was in Canada in 2021 and finishing off my directorial debut and working on something. And then, I strangely had a dream, no pun intended, about playing Martin Luther King. It was July 15th, 2021. And then a month later, August 17th, this role to play Martin Luther King in Rustin came up. And I was like, well, who's Rustin? Who's that? And then I quickly started researching. And then I realized Coleman, who I'd worked with a couple of times before, and we have a great friendship and relationship, was playing Rustin. We worked together on Lee Daniels The Butler, on one of Ava DuVernay's pilots. And so I was like, oh my God, C's playing Rustin. Who's Rustin? And then slowly learning that Rustin and his influence on King and the fact that he led him into this idea of nonviolence, putting the guns away. And, it's profound. I was like, well, who's this guy? He's a Gandhi-like figure to Martin Luther King. And so that was kind of a revelation. But like you said, very astutely, he's supporting role in this film and but such a centralized role because of his friendship with Rustin and the fact that the film takes this journey of these two friends who have to go separate ways with this slight betrayal that comes full circle at the end of Rustin being embraced by his friend publicly, and so the king I portray in this movie is the king that nobody's ever seen. Is the king behind closed doors. It is the king in his real life, his secret life. People don't know that guy. And so my desire was to find a way to be very grounded, very connected, and connected to that friendship and what it meant to King and what it meant to him to have to or feel like he was pressured into not standing up for your friend, which basically is any human being can relate to that, right? Where you're fearful of something and you don't stand for something in that moment. And the standing for something is not this monumental event. It's so personal. And you carry that pain with you. And so I think with this Martin Luther King, the audience has an opportunity to really connect in a human way to him in a way that often sometimes feels distant, you know?
Think we're also not really seeing him making speeches and his very public, recognizable voice. That's because people, I think, have heard so many recordings of him actually speaking, and that's really not what we're seeing here. And even that, just that, not that even that same energy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think what George C. Wolfe does really brilliantly is he starts to pepper it in throughout the movie. So the first version of some kind of speech is when, he says Bayard and he has the room listen and he says, in order to get the bill passed, you see him making the beginnings of that vibe of what he does or what he's known to do. And then later on, when on the TV, when Bayard and him are connecting, and he's saying, Mr. Rustin is one of the most moral individuals I've ever met. Again, very grounded King. And if you look at King, he does do a lot of grounded speeches. He's not always professing. And then obviously the moment of all moments, the famous I have a dream speech. So, it's really refreshing to do that version of him. And it's really refreshing to be received. I mean, the reception that I've gotten from this role just within the last 3 weeks is unbelievable because he means so much to people around the world and especially to American people. And they're like, man, I got a window into his house. I got to sit with him, which you just don't get to do. So that feels amazing. That feels amazing.
As someone who's not American, do you think that he has a different relevance abroad and internationally?
I always like to say, he's like the father to Americans or, especially African Americans, but I think Americans in general. And he's like our favorite uncle. He's the guy that, you know, uh, most certainly influences culture and and is a beacon for Black people around the world for sure. But that's been American culture, period. You know, I grew up, just me being an actor, you know, my heroes were the African American actors, you know, and the American white actors. But where I could see myself is like, oh, there's Washington, there's Sidney Poitier, oh, there's Don Cheadle, oh, there's, you know, Forrest Whitaker, you know, those. And it's very similar when it comes to civil rights. You know, often the African Americans have kind of amplified the moment, and that's trickled down to the rest of the small pockets and fragments of society. You know, I've got Jamaican heritage, so Marcus Garvey plays a massive in African American civil rights history. He's a massive component to that. You know, he also inspired King. So it's this great circular thing that I think is it's one thing at the end of the day.
He's a figure that we've seen also portrayed in film and television in the past, including David Oyelowo did a very memorable, turn in Selma. Did you look at anything like that, either for inspiration or for rather something you didn't want to do in this performance because you wanted to do something different?
You know, watch those films, man. When am I watching those films? I'm joking. So I know David really well. And funny enough, David gave me Liz Himmelstein, his voice coach for this. I mean, David been friends for 17 years, you know, so a long time. So I didn't have to watch Selma because I was at the premiere for it. And I understood that. I watched a little bit of Jeffrey Wright's interpretation, and then I kind of just left it alone and really stuck to King's interviews. You know, me and this great researcher coach, Diana Castle, whenever I'm doing a role, we do great research on like the person. And we found so much, like, he's, like you said, he's a very well documented man. We found so much fringe interviews that no one amplifies. And that's where you get to see his cheekiness, his smile, the way he laughs, the way he connects, the way he really pontificates. He's a great listener, phenomenal listener, which is a massive part of his power. And for me as well, one of the access points to really understanding King was to look at what it meant when it was said, you know, judge not by the color of the skin, but contents of your character. Well, what does that mean beyond the bumper sticker of that quote? And to me, it meant really delaying judgment when you're speaking to people, really being super present and taking in everything about them without your thoughts interrupting too much. And it gave me a sense of nirvana. And when I was on set, you know, I would basically be him. You know, no one really met me in my voice for probably the majority of the shoot. You know, they heard me as King, they heard me, and they felt me in that energy, you know, in that more subdued, listening, open energy. So that really helped me to be a bit more like, you know, method leaning, which is what I found to work for me at times. Yeah.
You also already mentioned Coleman as a co-star, but obviously you have Glynn Turman, you have Chris Rock, you have all these other people. What was it like being part of this huge ensemble?
I mean, yeah, you know, Chris Rock's an absolute legend, you know, and you know, he's just a very, you know, he did this film for the right reasons, man. He wanted to really amplify it. So I really love that. Glenn Turman's like sitting next to the history books of some of the greatest moments in the history of cinema and civil rights. And he's there in the picture, not next to, talking with the actual people. So no, Glenn Turman, you're just sitting there and you're just like, man, you know, he's got this really raspy voice. And back in when me and Aretha, you know, he smokes cigars and he's got the cowboy hat and, you know, he's like, you know, Clint Eastwood, salt of the earth type of guy, you know what I mean? So I loved it. I loved it. Him and George C. Wolfe, and George C. Wolfe is another guy, you know, genius is touted around a lot as a thing these days, but he has a plethora of knowledge that you're just going, wow, like, tell me more, you know? So anytime you can be around people that have so much story and so much to offer and so much to pour into you, it's a massive deal, you know?
It's also nice. This film is very, uplifting and inspiring, obviously, despite some of the things that it portrays. And in a time where we have so much violence going on in the world and so much violence and other things in movies, it's nice to have something like this, which really, overall, I think is a feel-good movie, which isn't to reduce its quality or anything. It's just that it's uplifting, it's positive, which is very nice.
I love what George did with it because, you know, often in movies of this nature, political dramas and civil rights dramas, you can be beat over the head, you know, and you can be with the trauma, and you can also get a little bit bored because you're like, what are they talking about? What are they talking about? But George has this quite really great jazz, rhythmic energy to the piece. It's got a pulse to it, and it just keeps going. And, you know, and that's what I loved about Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. You know, he finds a way to engage the audience, and he doesn't forget the audience. He brings them into it and says, look, I'm gonna take you on this ride. You're gonna get to know some things, you know, and you're gonna get to, and you're gonna have to quantify, like, what does that mean? But at the same time, you know, I'm gonna make you enjoy yourself. And you're gonna be around these brilliantly smart people, but they're also gonna be very flawed and messy. And you're gonna be able to relate to that as an audience, you know. So that's why I think the film does really, really well.
Yeah, Coleman's an actor where I'm not sure where I ever first saw him, but whenever I think of him, I always think of the, a one, a two, a you know what to do. And he just does over and over again in Ma Rainey with Glenn also. So it's nice to see them back together with George in this.
And Michael Potts as well. Yeah, he assembled the band. He assembled the great Avengers team. You know, you had, you know, Thor and, you know, Iron Man and all these guys. And then they went, you know what? Let's get Spider-Man in and Mel Amin and let's see what he can do. You know, the kid version. I come in there, I'm like, all right, cool. All right, cool. You know what I mean? So that was good. That was fun.
Well, I know you've done a lot of TV work. I think I first saw you in season one of Sense8. I know however many years ago that was. Do
Yeah.
you have a preference between TV and film?
I've actually done a lot more film, actually, you know, and I think I do prefer film. I prefer film because it, you know, there's so many incredible stories that have been done on TV, and when TV is shot like film, and, you know, in a contained amount of time, then it's brilliant. You know, I've just done a TV show which I refer to as a film, but it's a TV show. Man in Full, Jeff Daniels, myself, Regina King directing, not George, David E. Kelly writing. And so when you're doing something like that, which is like a six-parter, it feels really intense and focused. You know what I mean? But I love film, man. You know, I love film. I think it exists. TV impacts greatly in that moment, but film for me, there's still something about film, that 2 hours, that hour and 45 minutes that you just plug on. It's like anytime like Goodfellas comes on, you're halfway through the movie on TV, you're like, oh, let me see what Ray's doing. You know what I mean? You're just like, funny how, you know what I mean? You just really, and I love that about film. You know, I think it captures lightning in a bottle. So I think I prefer film. Don't tell people that. Don't tell people.
Well, I know you also directed for the first time. What was that experience like? And is that something you want to do again soon?
100% doing it soon. Completely in love with directing. I'm one of 8 siblings, you know, the third. And so I've been directing forever and a day. You remember those big cameras you put on your shoulder? I was 11 years old doing that with my siblings. Like, all right, you go there, and okay, then you jump in here, and then you're gonna act like, you know, you're Biggie Smalls, and then you'll act like, you know, you're Mace, and you know what I mean? Like, you know, I've been doing that forever. So it's a long time dream of mine. And then when I got to the States and started earning some money, I would fund my own short films. So I did about 4 or 5 of those. And then Warner Brothers UK and BFI and Film 4 gave me a shot to make a romantic comedy, a holiday romantic comedy, Boxing Day, which has built this amazing, over the last 2 years, this amazing cult following of people that it's a lot of people's favorite film for the holidays. And I think that's because it puts the entire experience of the diaspora of, like, you know, the African American, the Black British, the Jamaican, the Nigerian, all in one house. And it's about me bringing my, you know, African American fiance over to meet my British wild Jamaican family. But my ex-girlfriend is this big pop star, and and she's very, very close to the family. In fact, her mum and my mum are best friends. And so this, you know, this combustible romp that people really love, and you know, begging me to make a sequel. I've got other things in the line before that, but yeah, so I love directing. You're going to see a lot more, touch wood, writing, directing from me. It's going to be something, God willing, I do for the rest of my life. Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to see that. I wish you plenty of luck. Thank you so much for taking a few minutes to speak with me today.
Thank you, mate. See you down the